Welcome to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. We believe life is about how we react. Welcome back to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. Sean, what's up with your face?
Wow, that's kind of messed up, bro. You know what? As some of our listeners will know, I've got a fresh wound on my forehead as of our conversation right now. It'll be a couple weeks old, but I fell yesterday. I sneezed in the morning as I was getting ready for work, and I know better with that FA. We lose balance easily. So I'd normally brace myself, grab the wall, or sit down or something.
Right.
Well, while I was getting ready for work, the sneeze came on pretty fast, and I felt in my bones it was going to be minor.
Oh.
And I'm like, it's fine. And I was next to a wall, so I thought, it might, send me a little bit. But the issue was, there was a lot of stuff around me on the floor and on the bed, and I was getting ready for work. So as I began to lose balance, I think sort of subconsciously, I also try to avoid knocking over my coffee, knocking over the iron, or whatever else, tripping over something. So in the midst of trying to not fall flat on my face, but also not knocking anything over, I ended up falling flat on my face, and on my way down, smacked my forehead on a pretty solid oak footboard on my bed.
Man.
And twisted my ankle a little bit and hit my hip on the floor, so even that was a little bruised on the left side. Thankfully, not the right side. I feel like that would upset all kinds of stuff. So anyway, I've got a pretty gnarly gash on my forehead.
A couple things. Number one, do you think that if you would have sacrificed your coffee or any of those other things that you were trying to protect, you would have been able to decrease the damage done to your own body?
Certainly. Like, I ended up falling sideways and backwards because I was trying to avoid all this other stuff. And honestly, I don't think I was trying to avoid it on purpose.
Right.
I think in your head, you just know it's there.
Yeah.
So watch out. And this ensued.
My other thought is everybody that has FA knows exactly what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. Like, when I feel a sneeze, I'm like, I better sit down or like hold on to something, because here we go, right?
Yep.
But I wonder if it's that way with, I'm sure it's that way with other neuromuscular diseases or other rare diseases, movement disorders maybe.
Sure.
So I put that out to the community. If you hear this and you're like, yep, I don't have FA, but I have that same experience, we want to hear from you.
I posted a thing on my story for Instagram, a little quiz, had a little bit of fun with it, and I probably got no less than 30 little messages, and I think 12 of them are other FAers, and every single one said, been there, done that.
Yep.
Or something of that nature, right? They knew exactly what I was up against and how easily that stuff happens.
And everyone probably has a selfie to show for it. Like, it would be cool to put, or not cool, I don't know, interesting to put all those together on one.
Yeah. Well, I remember, didn't you do something similar last year? You hit your head on the sink or cupboard as you were doing dishes?
Yep, exactly. Yeah, and I sneezed and my head went down and hit the faucet.
Have you ever sneezed while driving?
I have, and it scares me, but I time it so my hand is not on the wheel. Like, I take my hand temporarily off the wheel.
Sure. Yeah, it's crazy how easily those things can really mess you up. Not to be totally morbid or depressing, but I think about the recent death of Bob Saget. Who knows exactly how he hit his head, But that ended up, whatever. I don't want to get totally depressed, but...
Wow, no, that... I just never thought of that. It's seriously like a threat to life, a sneeze.
Yeah, right?
Like, that's
right?
so weird.
It is bizarre. So I guess all that to say, be careful out there, kids.
Yep. All right, Sean, it's time for What Say You? This review is on Apple Podcasts, and it comes from C. Plummer. And they say, my grandson was recently diagnosed with FA. In my search for any and all information, I stumbled on this podcast. I've binge listened to years of episodes in the last week or so, and Kyle and Sean now feel like family. And that is so wonderful to hear. I remember when I was first diagnosed and how uncertain everything was. We didn't know anything about FA, much less anyone else who has FA. And it all changed when we started connecting with other individuals and families dealing with FA. And it helps combat that uncertainty. That's a big part of the battle. And so, C. Plummer, we encourage you to help other people along in their journey when you're ready, just like you learn from other people.
Yep. I also want to point out that they gave us 5 stars. Okay, this review is 5 stars. But I also want to say something that sticks out to me, Kyle, as I read this. I'm grateful and I'm really happy that this grandchild has a grandma that's going all in on this condition. It's one thing for people to say, hey, I'm sorry to hear about this, but I'm here for you. Let me know if you need anything. And it's a whole nother thing for somebody to initiate education and learning whatever they can and essentially immersing themselves in the conditions and concerns their loved one is up against and being a part of the journey on a very real and knowledgeable way. I'm not downplaying anybody that says, oh man, let me know if you need anything. There's a place for that. But when you have those few friends or loved ones that learn everything they possibly can so they can find a way to empathize and relate and just join you in the journey is different. So, Grandma, thank you for being that person and an example to your grandson. Sorry you're up against a new diagnosis, but I'm excited that you have found some family to connect with, and of course, I'm happy you found this podcast. And I assume if you binged it, you're enjoying it. So thank you.
Well said, Sean. So the question for today, for our consideration, is how would your life change if there were a treatment or cure tomorrow? I think it's something that we all think about because that's what our goal is a lot of times when we're raising funds or engaging to accelerate research. And so what happens when that day comes that we have a treatment or cure? What do you think?
Well, I would hope that little injuries like the one on my forehead right now are less common. It's kind of silly, but like we started, it can be concerning to think I can break my femur just because of a silly slip and fall, or losing balance because of this, that, or the other, or banging your head. So I'm sure there are other things that we can get into, but just on the surface, I would hope that subconscious trying to avoid knocking something else over wouldn't be as devastating as it is, right? But it's not so much that it's a bummer to knock over the iron or the coffee cup. as much as it is. I think the real concern, at least for me, is that I know my body is going to overreact. I don't know about you, but I feel like when I brush up against something that I didn't expect, my body overreacts, and that's when accidents tend to happen. So at the very least, I would hope for less minor injuries.
Yeah, I agree. And so in this discussion, I think it's important and necessary to define what treatment and cure means, because it means something different to everyone. It probably even means something different to each of us depending on what our mood is at the time, right?
Sure.
For me, as I learn more and more about the possibilities of treatment, I'm not expecting to get up out of my wheelchair and run a 5K, but I'd love to be able to button my shirt more quickly or be able to cook on the stove because I have a little more control over my hands and arms, or to be able to drive with my feet again because I can now feel the pedal under my foot.
Yeah.
So I don't necessarily think it's the big things. Like, I'm not going to get up and like become an NBA star. Well, I'm already 40, so
That's
that
part
probably
of it.
correct. But there is a lot of things that could be improved that aren't necessarily like getting up out of my chair and walking around. Like, for example, I think of during the pandemic, I talked about the fact that I tried to crawl across the room.
Oh, yeah.
And like I fell over when I tried to crawl. And I don't need to be able to walk again, but what if I could crawl again? That would be cool. Sure. Or sometimes I lose my balance when I'm sitting. And just if I could get a little more of that trunk stability back, that would be huge too. So I think there's a lot of those things.
I don't think we talked about it here, but a couple weeks ago, I had to go out and buy a new keyboard for the computer because my dexterity in my arms or control of the arms just isn't there. And I knocked over my cup of coffee and it got all over the keyboard to my computer. And I don't trust myself to take it apart and try to, dry it out and do whatever I can there. So little stuff like that would be awesome. As you're talking, I think I would love to be able to run into a store and grab a thing real quick. Maybe not run, I don't have to sprint, but without having to grab people or really think about 3 steps ahead or worry about other people walking around me, certainly not having to load and unload my walker. Like, it would be great to be able to pull into a spot, walk into Starbucks, grab my cup, and walk right out without taking 7 minutes to find the curb cut, to pull my walker out, to kind of manage those things. I also think about work. When I go to work, I'm only 3 miles from my office, but it's a 20-minute endeavor because I walk slow to get to my car, then I gotta load my walker up, and then when I get there, I gotta unload all my stuff, put it, load up my walker, and then it takes me 7 minutes just to walk in the store. So I realize I park often on time, but the time I actually get in the office, I'm late. And it's because I fail to remember that I can't do things as quickly as I used to, I guess.
Right. Everything is more complicated. Yeah. Okay, fine. There's a lot of things we can still do. Yeah. And, we talk about that a lot, but there's a lot of preparation and equipment and stuff that goes into simple things. Like you said, going into the store and just grabbing a cup of coffee.
Or even just carrying stuff across the house or, from my car to my room. Like those little things, I think would add a lot of value to life and not necessarily I don't need to run a marathon or play basketball. I'm okay with not being able to play tennis or things like that. But man, I feel like it would be pretty awesome if I could help myself to a glass of water without needing help or without having to brace myself on the counters and the walls and the sofa as I walk across the living room.
One specific thing that I think of that I would love to be able to do is walk around the office with a cup of coffee without thinking about it. And I admit that I'm not sure that I'm getting up out of my wheelchair anytime soon, but just the dexterity and balance. I mean, even sitting in my chair with a cup of coffee and going around to different people in the office and just saying hello. It's just something that somebody who doesn't have that headache or is able-bodied just does not think about it at all. I would love to be able to not think about those simple things.
Yep, I hear you on that one. It'd be nice to have a cure that reverse damage, but I'd be okay with just stopping where it's at. You know, you talked about defining a treatment or a cure. And I think a lot of us are on probably different places of what we hope for and what we expect. Obviously, I would hope that a treatment could help somebody younger at an early diagnosis. Maybe that keeps them out of a wheelchair and allows them to continue living a full life or a life fully engaged in all physical aspects possible. But for me personally, yeah, I'd be okay with things just stopping where they're at.
Yeah.
And to me, that would be a cure and exciting, something to celebrate.
Yeah, I think of the conversation we had about buying a house and, you know, not thinking ahead about the ramp or the walk-in shower and all that stuff. And I just think about planning for the future in general and how much easier it would be if you knew how your progression was going to go. Like I think by now we generally can project, right, for ourselves. But it would be nice to be like, okay, my balance is not going to get worse from this point on. I can count on that.
Yeah. As you're talking, I'm thinking of something totally random. You know, a lot of different conditions and diseases and whatever else has treatments in the form of a pill or an injection or something. And as we always hear in commercials, there are 1,001 side effects to every sort of treatment. So, my question for you, Kyle, let's play a round of Would You Rather.
Yeah.
When it comes to a treatment, would you be okay with having just baseline what you talk about, having a little more control in your arms and, you know, again, maybe not being able to stand up and walk around without your chair, but would you be okay with those little things improving, but constant diarrhea?
I don't...
Not sure. What if it was those things, but you dealt with headaches every day?
I think I'd rather deal with FA than stomach and gastrointestinal issues and pain, like headaches. Yeah. I have a lot of respect for people that deal with that kind of stuff on a daily basis. There are conditions that have those symptoms in...
Sure.
I don't think I trade mine for those.
Yeah. You know, I have a friend that is constantly plugged up. His allergies are really bad. So, what about that? Your nose was constantly running. Your eyes were always watery, and you had this sense of just being plugged up. But you could walk again. Would you trade for that?
Right off, I'm thinking about it. I might do that. Yeah.
Okay.
But it's also, I was thinking, you know, it's the devil you know, right? Like,
totally.
I've set up my life to be able to accommodate all these things, like, they come along with FA, you know, like the wheelchair and the lack of coordination and all that. And I know how to deal with those things and get the things done that I want to do.
Sure.
And so it's hard to hear a different symptom and be like, oh, yeah, I can totally do that, you know?
Right. Yeah, there's probably people out there right now listening to this saying, oh, that's what I deal with, and it sucks. You know, I totally get that. So certainly don't mean to downplay any other condition or side effects or symptoms. That comes to mind, you know, if we had to give up something else, would we be willing to do that?
For sure.
You know, a few weeks ago, we talked to Ennis, Rick Bash, and a story, I think, in The Witcher, where that lady, you know, had to give up her ability to have babies to get a cure. So even things like that. Would you give up an eyeball to be able to walk again?
Right.
Or an arm, or, you know, things like that.
Yeah.
You don't have to answer that, but I certainly think about things like that too. What would I be willing to trade?
Yeah.
If I could.
Another aspect of it is that once we have a treatment, it's not going to work on every single person in the FA community. And I'm not sure there's a whole lot to say this or that about that, but I think that's one of the factors that our community is going to have to think about. And for me, you know what? If it doesn't work for me, I am so glad that it works for 100 other people or whatever it is.
Yep. My hope would be it works for C. Plummer's grandson, right?
Yes.
I think I know who this person is. They reached out in an email or something. And I want to say the grandson's maybe 10 years old. He's got his whole life ahead of him. And if a treatment can help allow him to drive and ride a bike and hang out with his friends without having to worry about wheelchair ramps and things like that, I think that's a win. That's a powerful win that I think we can all celebrate.
Big time. That's a good point. The two of us are, you know, out to pasture, man. Like, we want it for the next generation.
Yep. Once you start getting gray in your beard, it's downhill.
Well, Sean, it's time for some thank you notes. Who do you have to thank today?
I'm going to tie my thank you in with my opening headbanging story. You know, I fell and busted up my forehead as I was getting ready for work. And the wound is in such an obvious spot that you can't just let it bleed out.
Right.
And the only Band-Aids I had were huge. So I started the morning with this big old Band-Aid stretching across my eyebrows. If it was a different color, literally it would look like a unibrow, just this major can't miss it sort of thing. And as I was leaving, thankfully, my roommates were out eating breakfast, and I asked them if they had one of those little round dots. And thankfully, they had a few, so they let me borrow or have a couple of Band-Aids that were less obvious, still apparent, just not as in your face kind of, ooh, something's wrong. So thank you, roommates, for hooking me up with a better sized Band-Aid for my day.
There you go. Gratitude for everything in life.
Yep. The little things make a difference. What about yours?
I want to say thank you to our friend Andra Stratton. I have a presentation I'm giving to a group next week, and I needed to practice, and she allowed me lots of time in her busy schedule to practice with her, and the presentation improved day and night from when I started with her and to now. I feel really confident about what I'm going to say next week. So thank you to Andra for helping me get that down.
I love it. Why don't you ever practice with me? I imagine Andra is nicer than I could be wrong. I don't know. But Andrew, thank you. Anything anybody can do to make Kyle sound better, I'm a fan. So Kyle, good luck with that presentation. I'm sure that'll be great.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for listening today. We encourage you to go on Apple Podcasts or whatever your favorite podcast app is and leave a review. We might even read it in What Say You. Please share this episode with a friend if you enjoy what you're hearing. Until next time, keep living with urgency. Thank you for listening to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. This show is possible with your support. Visit twodisableddudes.com to donate.
Connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app.